Welcome to the Sealed Pages. This is our dedicated space, a contemplative space where we really take the time to sit with works of profound literary and philosophical weight.
And we've had the real privilege of exploring Feroz Anka's work before. You might remember some of our previous deep dives.
We did spend quite a bit of time with Lines of the Void. That was his, philosophical, poetic journey through symbols and masks, time, chaos. And it really pushed us to ask whether we're living in reality or just inside our own maps of it.
And then, of course, it was passed to myself. Such a quiet, powerful guide to solitude. It charted that road away from the noise of crowds and borrowed voices, leading you through silence toward a kind of inner harmony.
And we can't forget what remains within. That collection of prose poems, so intensely personal, all about unsaid words, grief, regret, and that fragile faith that somehow manages to survive inside our own personal ruins.
Feroz Anka's writing is just so uniquely informed by his background. He comes from this world of incredibly complex global IT leadership, software engineering, digital transformation in, almost 20 countries?
Uh-huh.
He's a veteran of complex systems.
And his writing really reflects that, doesn't it? It feels like he's always seeking to illuminate the deep human code that's running underneath all the noise of modern life.
Exactly.
Today, we're turning our attention to his latest work. And it's a profound piece that I think synthesizes his experience with systems and his search for meaning. It's called The Geography of Truth, a journey into meaning through places you were born to walk.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really explore this work. It's categorized as a philosophical poetic essay and also metaphysical fiction. And we should be very clear right from the start. This is not a travel book. It's not a history lesson.
No, not at all. It's an exploration that uses the entire Earth, physical and historical, as a kind of metaphysical atlas. That's the core genius of it, I think, how he reframes geography itself.
Absolutely. The central concept is that every place we visit, every single geographical feature with all its historical layers and metaphysical echoes, it all serves as a map of human consciousness. Every mountain becomes a concept. Every river becomes a question. Every city is a fragment of the soul's current condition.
So the journey he's setting out for us isn't an outward one. We're not tracking miles between continents. We're moving across the geography of our own inner life. And every stop reveals something incredibly profound about these fundamental human elements: faith, rebellion, surrender, forgotten truths.
And that journey, it really begins visually before you even open the book. The cover itself just immediately sets this contemplative tone. You see this glowing, almost Earth-like sphere. And it suggests right away that landscapes aren't just static physical places. They hold memory, they hold longing, they hold spiritual direction.
I found the colors, the tones themselves to be so reflective of that internal state. They're warm, almost volcanic. It reflects a world that is, yes, living, but also wounded by history. And yet it's still luminous. It's a planet carrying this immense layered weight of human experience.
And the lines radiating from it are so important to that idea. They look like old sunbursts or maybe compass rays. And they emphasize that fundamental truth of the book. The real map isn't pointing outward to physical places. It's pointing inward, back toward the self who is doing the walking and the reading.
And that dark cosmic background is essential. It pulls you out of this mundane view of a fixed planet and invites you to see the world as a living metaphor. It's a complete set of guideposts that are all leading us back to our essential nature, to our deepest self.
It's just a brilliant piece of literary architecture. It sets up the whole foundation, this vocation of remembering the difference between just looking at something and truly seeing it. He frames geography as the deepest, most honest mirror we have.
He establishes this right in the introduction. It's a quiet but really resonant call to action. He tells the reader, every journey begins with a question, but some questions exist not to be answered, but to set you walking. That one phrase is, in a way, the thesis of the entire book.
It immediately shifts the whole paradigm for the seeker. We're all conditioned to look for answers, for closure. But he suggests that a true spiritual life requires this sustained, meaningful motion that's guided by inquiry. And that movement isn't just physical, it's a movement of the soul.
This feeling is just amplified by that quote we see early on. The earth speaks, but we cannot hear it because our ears have grown used to concrete and our hearts to noise.
We've built our physical city so loud, the noise is so constant that we've completely lost the quiet capacity for listening, for hearing those sacred echoes that are embedded in the Earth's geography. We've traded resonance for volume.
And he really underscores why this journey has to be an inward one. He says, truth is, most often, not the road of the compass, but the path of the one who has lost their way. That is such a profound validation for anyone who feels spiritually unanchored. He's suggesting that the very feeling of being lost is the prerequisite for finding a genuine path.
It's liberating, isn't it? If you rely on the compass, you only find what's already been charted. But if you trust your disorientation, your feeling of being lost, you might just find something utterly new and essential about yourself.
So we move from there into the first major section, which he calls The Journey Begins. From geography to the human. This covers the first 11 chapters. And here Anka really sets the philosophical stage. He traces existence from these foundational civilizations all the way to what he calls spiritual temperament, looking at how human consciousness first expressed itself in a place.
It's a masterful way to start, chronologically. He grounds these deep, abstract concepts in the oldest known places where human beings first decided to settle down and build.
He starts with Mesopotamia, where words were born. His argument is that the soil there brought forth not just crops, but meaning itself. But in that very act of building the first cities, we immediately see this profound contradiction of early civilization. Cities were built, yes, but the first exiles were also suffered.
And this is where that inherent duality emerges, and it's so critical to his entire thesis. He writes, "The first word was carved into stone, but the truest trace was left in the human heart." The moment we fixed the word, the moment we externalized our knowledge onto stone tablets, we created an object that could be separated from the human being.
And that separation is the source of all forgetting. By fixing the word, we introduced rigidity, law, and eventually the necessity of being expelled from the garden. The written word, while it enabled civilization, also enabled the loss of that oral, fluid, intuitive truth that's only held in the heart.
It's such a powerful insight, especially today. I mean, think about our digital world. We are externalizing every single thought, every memory, into a kind of digital stone. We build these enormous, complex systems of external memory, but what's the price? What's the cost to the memory that's held in the human heart? Mesopotamia is the first echo of the word, but it's also the ground of the first great forgetting.
From that static foundation of written language, he then moves to the Nile. On the shore of wisdom, in the flow of time, the river is seen as flowing like time itself, silent, leaving its trace, a powerful symbol of continuous, relentless change.
The Nile, as he frames it, is a dynamic teaching. It carries the massive, arrogant palace of the pharaoh on its banks, which symbolizes human pride and command. But paradoxically, it also carries the tiny basket of Moses, a symbol of humility and chosen exile. It carries both the instrument of oppression and the source of eventual liberation at the same time.
And this juxtaposition makes the river a mirror. Anka asks us to look at the water today, and he says, we might see one of your own questions floating by. The river doesn't just flow, it overflows, and it brings either flood destruction, chaos, or awakening, which is fertility and wisdom. It's never neutral.
No, not every river simply flows. Some of them carry you back to yourself. The Nile reminds us that time isn't linear or abstract. It's a current that carries the weight of history and the possibility of destiny all at once.
We then pivot, and it's a dramatic pivot, both geographically and philosophically. We go to Central Asia and the steppe, the journey of migration beneath the open sky. Here, the focus shifts entirely from fixed structures to the nobility that can be found in transience.
This is such a vital counterpoint to Mesopotamia. Civilization here isn't built on stone, it's built on the sky. For the nomadic people of the steppe, belonging is based on that vastness, where migration itself is treated as a form of prayer. The true home is carried internally, in the heart, not fixed on a coordinate.
It's the philosophy of essentialism, really. Everything excessive is just given over to the wind or to the speed of movement. The nobility lies in not putting down rigid roots, but in passing on a melody, a tradition, a truth, without distorting it through too much institutionalization.
And he captures this perfectly with the quote, "What remains in the steppe is not what is left unsaid, but what is passed on without being lost." It speaks to this profound belief that essential wisdom is preserved through continuity and movement rather than through walls and archives.
Contrasting that expansive movement, Anka then moves inward again. He reflects on the Far East, the silent echo of inner discipline, focusing on Zen and Tao. And this emphasizes simplicity as the essence of existence, where the geography itself reinforces that inward turn.
The lesson of the Tao is crucial here. The concept of flowing without forcing, or wu wei, this state of natural action without excessive effort or ego. True weight is carried in silence, he says. Discipline is simply alignment with the flow of the universe, with the way.
The geography reinforces this. The silent mountains, the disciplined gardens. The monk sits, and within that stillness, the storms of the mind can finally come to rest. The soul becomes a lake reflecting the sky. This is a place where sound exists not to be heard, but to be forgotten, which allows a deeper awareness to emerge.
We also briefly touch on South Asia, where the Ganges is not just a river, but a cleansing agent for destiny. It shows that purification is sought not through outward sacrifice, but through acceptance and absorption of life's flow.
And finally, to conclude this really expansive first section, Anka brings us to Northern Europe in a chapter called A Search Within Godlessness. This is a fascinating chapter because he reframes atheism or secularism not as a simple denial, but as a profound philosophical silence.
It's a silence born of hurt, of questioning, of systems that fail to provide comfort. Anka observes that in these cold, often structured landscapes, God is never forgotten, only his name has changed. The rejection is often just a masked longing for a broken father figure to return, or maybe a deep grief over answers that never came.
That quote is arresting. It really requires some contemplation. Some silences are the most heartfelt cries of those who have forgotten how to pray. So the coldest, most structured, or seemingly post-spiritual landscapes might actually be hiding the deepest, most articulate longing for that divine connection.
And this sets up the second section perfectly, the coordinates of revelation and belief. It shows us where humanity turned that longing into formalized structure, following the geographic traces of the word as it took root in the earth.
Anka makes the case that the divine word, while it might descend from the sky, always required an anchor in a physical place to be understood and enacted by people.
We begin with Ararat, the first silence after the flood. It's the physical manifestation of a great pause. Humanity, having spoken with such oppression that the waters rose, now stood on Ararat on the verge of meeting the word again, in a state of primal innocence.
The profound insight here is that the flood wasn't just a punishment. It was an extreme form of cleansing memory, a reset. Therefore, the first word spoken after the flood had to be repentance, not a repetition of the errors that caused the water to rise in the first place. Some beginnings are washed not only with water, but with silence.
Then we move to the first no beneath the shadow of stones. Was a city carved from fear. Every idol, every physical representation of a lesser power was just a fear given a shape. Idolatry, he suggests, is the architecture of collective fear.
And it's here that Abraham, as a child, performs this quiet revolution. He rises in the night to ask, "Why do you pray to those who cannot speak?" That single no was the birth of Tawhid, the fundamental oneness of God, a radical shift away from the fragmented, fearful world of polytheism.
It began not with a war, not with a conquest, but with a question and a physical act of quiet defiance. The fire that was meant to burn him did not, because fire is charged not only with burning, but also with giving light. Anka states, sometimes a truth grows in the shadow of a single no. It emphasizes the immense power of individual, intentional resistance against a dominant system of fear.
The emotional impact just heightens when we reach the Sea of Lot, or Sadi. Anka suggests that the destruction didn't come instantly. It came slowly, beginning with the collapse of honor and conscience. The city's downfall wasn't a sudden burst of fire, but a gradual internal rot that began years before the catastrophe.
The physical geography, that heavy, dead, salt sea, it reflects the metaphysical state of the city's heart. When shame and honor collapse, the city itself becomes a living ruin, just waiting for the final word.
And the raw human tragedy of it all is sealed by Lot's wife's single look back. Anka reads such immense metaphysical weight into this one glance. He says, some glances do not merely turn away, they leave whole ages behind. Her inability to let go of the comforts or maybe the corruption of the past sealed her fate. It's a reminder that our conscious decisions carry the ultimate spiritual currency.
We continue this journey of revelation to Sinai, the voice that came from the fire. This mountain, once quiet and unremarkable, became the ultimate threshold where the word touched the ground. Moses was searching not for a better direction, but for ultimate truth.
And the profound realization that happens at the mountain is that it is not you who must go up, but a word that must come down. The journey required an external movement, Moses' ascent, only to facilitate an internal event, which was the divine word's descent. When divine speech meets stone, the stone itself is fundamentally transformed into the carrier of the word.
Sinai is that confrontation. It sets the journey toward truth against the systems of power and servitude represented by Pharaoh. It's the moment where faith becomes codified, yet at the same time, deeply, deeply personal.
Next, Anka introduces Nineveh, the story of Jonah, in the call echoing within flight. This city refused to hear the truth. It became stubborn. And Jonah, weary of striking his words against the resistance, just walked away. He intended to flee the burden of his message, but this flight, Anka notes, it wounded his intention.
Right. He had to board a ship and then, be swallowed by the dark to find his inner voice of repentance. The powerful paradox here is essential to understanding the path of truth. Sometimes, to convey the truth, it is not enough to go, you must descend into it. He needed to hit rock bottom, the ultimate descent, to rise as a reborn messenger with a genuine rather than grudging intention.
The journey then culminates in what he calls the three sacred centers, the focal points of spiritual gravity. First, Jerusalem, where voices gather at a single gate. It's presented as this relentless crossroads where revelation is a constant, often bloody human process. Every prophet, every figure, from Abraham to Jesus, either resisted or wept in this geography.
Jerusalem is where the Torah, the Psalms, the Gospel, they all converge, constantly calling back to the One. Anka portrays the city not merely as stone, but as a kind of justice continuously washed with human tears. Some cities never fall silent. They are a word that echoes the name of God.
Then Mecca, the direction where time is fixed. Mecca is presented as the axis where time set itself not by the rotation of the sun, but by the rhythm of prostration. The Kaaba sets a Qibla, the direction of prayer.
And Anka emphasizes that the Qibla is not a direction of geography, but a direction of intention. It reminds the believer that the physical alignment of bodies outward is meaningless unless it reflects the internal alignment of the heart. It is the place where that vertical connection of faith intersects with the horizontal reality of the earth.
And finally, Medina, the city of mercy and brotherhood. If in Mecca the word was born as pure revelation, in Medina it lived. It became a functional community. It transitioned from speech to a way of life where a migrant and a helper could share a heart and build a civilization based on mercy and solidarity.
Truth becomes a city only when it is lived together. Medina is the proof of concept, where revelation stopped being just abstract theology and became embodied social architecture.
We transition from there into part 3, Maps of Faith. Here, Anka contrasts the major systems of belief, and he emphasizes this shared, invisible map that sets a human being's direction, upward, deeper, and beyond.
He shows that despite all the divergent practices, that fundamental search for meaning, it remains universal.
For instance, in Buddhism, which he frames as enlightenment through silence in the Himalayas, the truth is found in the void through a rejection of attachment. Suffering, or dukkha, results from grasping. And the path requires what he calls right silence, a silence that is intentional and full, not just empty.
And the deep insight there is that enlightenment isn't some sudden arrival. It's what remains when all the shadows and all the noise finally withdraw. The Himalayas themselves are a teaching. Each summit is crossed when one more desire, one more attachment is quietly left behind. Anka posits, truth is not spoken. When it is truly noticed, speech falls quiet.
We see a similar current in Taoism, the way that flows in balance. The Tao can't be explained because the path has no end. And that concept of wu-wei doing without forcing means that one who walks in the Tao is, paradoxically, going nowhere.
It's the philosophy of movement without friction. The essential lesson is so profound in its simplicity. The true road begins at the point where you cease to walk. It's about finding truth in the subtle, effortless balance of nature, moving like water, not resisting like a rigid rock.
Then he looks at the diaspora and the Abrahamic traditions. Judaism, the broken map of the diaspora, is framed not only as a religion of a people, but of a memory that is carried everywhere. Faith, Anka observes, becomes not a fixed temple, but a portable suitcase.
The core of Jewish survival is remembrance. The temple may have fallen, but the Qibla, the direction of the heart, it remained fixed in the memory of the Promised Land and the covenant. So long as it does not forget, no people is truly in exile. Their continued existence becomes this profound geographical act of continuous memory.
Christianity, faith wandering in the shadow of the cross, is framed as a story of sacrifice and radical forgiveness. It began with a cradle and ended at a cross, resisting the world's power structures with mercy. It grew not by victory, but by endless compassion.
The focus there is so intensely on suffering and compassion as geographical markers. The cross becomes the vertical shape of a heavy burden that is borne willingly. And the ultimate resistance is forgiveness, which Anka notes is silent and unending. He says, the deepest faith begins at the place where you forgive in silence.
And Anka concludes this section with an analysis of modern unbelief, silence within godlessness. And this isn't the atheism of the Enlightenment. It's a contemporary philosophical silence that's rooted in trauma, in the inability to trust systems, institutions, or even sometimes the self.
The modern mind is just trapped between this absolute technological freedom and a desperate need for meaning. The system, The economic, political, social architecture has collapsed in the eyes of the modern seeker, not necessarily God himself.
And the greatest tragedy of modernity, Anka suggests, is that the system has successfully smothered that inner primordial voice where the connection still whispers. The rejection is often just a masked longing for what was lost. And we see the truth in his final observation here. God is never forgotten, only his name is changed.
That leads us to section 3, where silent stones speak, which is part 4 of the book. And this shifts our focus to the deepest strata of civilizational memory. Anka demonstrates that time buries cultures, but the stones of the earth remember everything, from prayers to unspoken fears.
Right. When a column falls, it's not only stone that drops, a direction is lost, and a prayer is left unfinished. The geography of ruin is just as informative as the geography of construction.
We start with the stone hills, Goba Klippe, and places like it, the hidden star map. This ancient knowledge wasn't designed merely as a sanctuary. Anka reads it as a calendar, an attempt to read cosmic rhythm by carving the vastness of the sky into the fixed ground.
The profound mystery is that this knowledge was deliberately buried by human hands to preserve it. Perhaps they were anticipating a catastrophe or a collapse of consciousness where this wisdom would be misunderstood or corrupted. It was coded to wait for a less distracted days. He says, "Every stone is the silence of a star. To hear it, looking is not enough, you must remember."
Next is Harappa, the stone memory of a silent civilization. A city whose streets were ordered and balanced, yet it seemingly lacked the noise of extensive verbal record. Anka proposes that silence wasn't a lack, but a form of simplicity in essence.
He suggests that sometimes saying nothing at all becomes the deepest prayer. Balance and order were achieved precisely because they lacked the noise and the fracturing of excessive self-referential language. A silent city achieved what Babylon, with all its noise, failed to keep.
Then we have the Egyptian pyramids. Intelligence veiled in architecture. Anka argues they were far more than tombs. They were massive devices aligned with the stars, preserving time and knowledge through meticulous, veiled astronomical calculation.
The deeper question is philosophical, isn't it? How can a structure be just a tomb if celestial maps and the mathematics of eternity are buried within its geometry? They preserve time, not just the dead. Anka concludes, some structures are not built, they are coded so they can be remembered. They are messages, frozen in a time capsule of stone.
Which leads perfectly to Babylon, where tongues mixed and scattered. This city represents the collapse of unity and meaning when the tower rose too high, fueled by human self-deification rather than connection to the earth or the divine.
The result wasn't just linguistic confusion, it was a loss of shared meaning. They were using one tongue, he argues, not to praise, but to command and to elevate themselves. Meaning is born not from a single language, but from a shared heart. The fragmented fallout of Babylon, that inability to understand one another despite a shared vocabulary, it still echoes in our fragmented modern discourse.
Moving to what he calls the aesthetics of abandonment, we find Petra. Consciousness carved into rock, a city carved directly into the landscape, abandoned quietly, leaving a deeper, more lasting mark.
Petra was inscribed not just into rock, but into time itself. It was abandoned slowly, without violence, without a scream, which Anka suggests is why it's never truly forgotten. Some silences are more lasting than any scream, for they do not echo, they settle. The quiet act of leaving is a profound form of resistance against the oblivion of noise.
And then Pompeii. Life frozen beneath ash. This is the ultimate capture of the human condition where time itself turned to stone. A dog still chained, a child holding a piece of bread, a life frozen in mid-motion.
Anka observes that a life frozen in a moment often tells us more about the essential human state, our vulnerability, our fleeting desires, than a long life lived fully and then forgotten. Every forgotten life is an echo most deserving of being remembered.
Then there's Machu Picchu, a stairway raised to the sky. This wasn't built for conquest, but for chosen forgetting, for protection. The aesthetic of abandonment prevails. Height here isn't for display, but for disappearing into the unseen.
Anka concludes that the highest place belongs to those who possess the wisdom to vanish within the unseen, those who understand that true strength lies in removing oneself from the spectacle of the world.
Finally, we encounter Atlantis and Mu, the call of lost consciousness. And he treats these not as physically sunken continents, but as symbolic geographies, a lost form of awareness that humanity possessed before it forgot itself.
This loss of awareness is key to his whole thesis. It represents a time when technology and revelation didn't clash, when humanity loses its intuition and its wholeness. Those inner continents, the holistic, unified self, they sink beneath the waves of rational specialization. Some losses are never found, they are only remembered.
And this leads us directly to Section 4, The Labyrinth of the Modern Mind, which is Part 5. Here, Anka turns his architectural eye onto the contemporary world, arguing that modernity successfully drew the map. But in doing so, it systematically erased the direction of the soul.
This section is particularly relevant, I think, for anyone navigating the noise of the 21st century. Anka shows the spiritual wreckage hidden beneath the glittering surfaces of progress. The mind accelerated so rapidly, but the soul was left behind, unable to keep pace with the machine.
He begins with Paris. Enlightenment, dress for the spectacle. The mind was opened by revolution and philosophy, but the heart was simultaneously veiled and ignored. Revolution is now sold in the cafes, but the inner world remains dark and profoundly lonely.
The physical manifestation of this loneliness is reflected, ironically, in the Eiffel Tower. It's a massive structure of steel, built for fleeting exhibition, signifying height but very little root. Everything is thought and spectacle, but very little is felt with genuine depth. Paris shines, but he suggests it shines with the fleeting glow of a shop window, not with internal light.
Next, London, a civilization built from smoke. This city is framed as the ultimate architect of system and protocol. It prioritizes structure over the human heart. The maps of a vast empire were drawn here, but the price was splitting the soul of the city itself, the rigid organization masking a deep industrial wound.
Big Ben, that iconic clock, isn't just counting time. He says it's counting the quietly decaying conscience that came with the Industrial Revolution. The smoke choked not only breath, but also moral introspection. It became a city defined by rules, where everything that glitters, the wealth, the influence, leaves a heavy psychological shadow behind it.
Then, New York, the capital where identity evaporates. This is the ultimate temple of capital, where people are defined entirely by their brand, their net worth, their latest acquisition, not by their name or their history. Freedom is the loudest slogan, yet he observes that no one truly feels free within the system.
The insight is particularly sharp here, and it connects back to his IT background. Any system that makes you forget your own name first dreams you, then sells you. The rise of capital respects nothing, not the past, not roots, not faith, only the upward trajectory of the profit graph. Human worth is determined by velocity and liquidity.
And you can contrast this with San Francisco, the loneliness of code. This is the city that excelled at analyzing the human being, at reducing our behavior to algorithms and data, but it ultimately failed to understand the human soul. Intelligence was gained at the expense of genuine existential meaning.
The ultimate irony resides there. For the sake of gathering more and more data, you deleted yourself. Creativity becomes a packaged pitch deck, and meaning matters far less than the flawless function of the algorithm. It is a city of immense intellectual brilliance that, paradoxically, risks becoming a graveyard of emotional code.
He moves on to cities he calls having fractured identities. Istanbul, a soul trapped between two shores. It's a literal crossing Europe and Asia that's never quite resolved, a place where history whispers in the background while the noise of hypermodernity blares in the foreground.
The city wanders. It's caught between its profound spiritual history and its frantic contemporary pursuit of Western speed. Silent prayer and blaring commercialism walk the same pavement, but the noise constantly postpones the arrival of any stable meaning. It's a city that once gave fixed direction to the world, now lost in its own directionlessness.
Dubai, the empty face of endless ascent. This city is the embodiment of ornament over meaning. The pursuit of height isn't born of necessity, but of an obligation to rise. The result is structures that are magnificent in scale but spiritually empty.
Rising here is an obligation. Standing still is perceived as richness. And Anka defines the price of this unrelenting vertical pursuit. The price of rising is becoming a stranger to the earth beneath you. The structures are magnificent, but the deliberate erasure of history and narrative makes them architecturally and culturally rootless.
And Las Vegas, the place where truth is hidden. This is pure spectacle, intentionally designed to distract the resident and the visitor from any form of sustained critical thought. Night doesn't exist because darkness invites reflection, and the city cannot feed upon reflection.
The sheer volume of light doesn't illuminate, it only distracts and overwhelms. The city consumes not only money, but the critical, contemplative capacities of the human being itself. The underlying honesty of Las Vegas lies in its spectacular unreality, its commitment to avoiding truth.
So, lonely bodies in the light of technology. Everything is shiny, communication is hyperfast, but the memory of human touch is weak. A population constantly optimized for an external ideal, leading to a disconnect between the inner self and the presented self.
Anka uses a powerful visual metaphor here. The light of technology is so bright that the brighter the light, the less visible the shadow becomes. They live constantly in this external light, unable to face the inner loneliness that bright light is designed to mask.
And Washington, the heart of the system-making machine, a capital built purely to govern from, not to be organically lived in. Decisions are made at the table and forgotten at the same table, insulated from human consequence.
It's the ultimate architecture of protocol. It's built not on heart or shared human experience, but on mechanism. And Anka concludes with a stark observation about the consequence of this functionalism. Where the soul falls silent, order runs flawlessly.
This exhaustive tour of the broken modern map forces the final turn. Section 5. Geographies of Resistance in the Inner Turn, which covers parts 6, 7, and 8, brings us to the emotional climax of the book. It moves from the pain of the outer world to the sanctuary of the inner world.
Part 6, Geographies of Resistance and the Cry, discusses lands where pain is buried so deeply in the soil that the earth itself acts as a witness to human cruelty and persistence.
We had to pause here, I think, to appreciate the emotional weight Anka carries in this section. He begins with Palestine, a voice reborn with every bomb. The stone becomes the body of the word when speech is silenced. It's the ultimate geography of persistence.
Anka notes that some lands are not drawn on maps, but traced in the heart. The pain is profound, but the focus is on the persistence. The story always begins again because death here isn't a full stop, but a comma in the long sentence of resistance.
Then Syria and Iraq, where lullabies are buried in the rubble. These lands, once the center of knowledge, now see their memory written not on flimsy paper, which burns easily, but tragically in shattered stone.
The question of historical accountability is raised. How could so much civilization be destroyed so easily? And the key insight is harsh, but true. It is man who forgets. Stone does not forgive. The stones hold the memory even when the perpetrator or the world tries to move on.
Anka then highlights these unique, quieter forms of resistance that define this geography. Argentina's mother's squares, where endless, patient waiting becomes a silent form of justice.
A mother's waiting is a political and spiritual act for which even the rigid accounting of time cannot provide a full measure. And in Iran, he focuses on the resistance begun with strands of hair, a revolution ignited by a deeply personal act of defiance born in the heart.
The veil, in this context, becomes a struggle of wills, a manifesto of the unseen self. Anka says, some veils are not made to close, but to brush against a truth that will one day be revealed. The revolution starts in that personal, quiet decision, and then expands.
Part 7, Silent Maps of Contemplation, shifts the focus entirely. Anka asserts that the truth is always whispering amid the chaos. The path isn't far. There is simply too much noise preventing us from hearing it.
We travel high up to Tibet and the Himalayas, the religion of silence. This geography teaches that true spiritual ascension isn't about climbing up, but about descending into depth, letting go of the weight that anchors us to the noise.
The ultimate geographical lesson of the Himalayas is, to ascend is not to go up into the sky, but to descend into the depth where sound comes to rest. To gain lightness, we have to consciously lay down our words, our titles, our self-serving pride. The inner space is vast enough only when it is quiet enough.
Then Konya, turning inward with Rumi. Surrender is framed as the ultimate dance, the Sema. The turning isn't merely a performance, but a shedding of all that is not oneself, a return to the absolute core, a single, focused turn that restarts an entire distorted life.
The journey culminates in the return, to nature, to the primordial self, to silence. Anka argues that modern speed is an escape of flight from our own fitra, our primordial, innate, uncorrupted self.
That word fitra is so key here. It represents the original unspoiled nature with which every human is born. The return is a deliberate, conscious longing for simplicity. And Anka marks the beginning of this journey so beautifully. The longest journey begins the first time you step barefoot back onto the earth. Nature reminds us of our essence. It never preaches.
And finally, sacred silence, the map of contemplation. At this stage, no external map is sufficient anymore. Silence becomes the state of creation before speech, that hollow, vast capacity that is finally deep enough to hold everything, where truth finally finds its tongue.
And Anka brings us to the final, most intimate geographies in Part 8, heart geographies. The deepest journey happens within a single, silent, intentional moment, and it requires only two locations, the heart and the grave.
The heart, the most sacred sanctuary, it's the oldest house within every human being. The first mirror where a person stops seeking outside and faces the divine within. It's the internal compass.
If the heart loses its direction, Anka argues, no road can lead to truth. The heart must be protected from external noise, because if the compass inside breaks, the vastness of the world only leads to further disorientation.
Then the grave. The little room at the threshold of eternity. This isn't darkness, but the first station where time falls silent and the noise of the world ends. It is the final self-audit, the place where all systems fail except one.
And here, you are asked the only question that really matters. Did you truly believe, or did you merely grow accustomed? The grave isn't narrow because of its physical dimensions. There is simply no room there for a self that has been swollen by the pride, titles, and material attachments of the world.
And finally, intention. The true owner of direction. Intention is the unseen body of everything. It's the essence of the entire journey. The question posed by the book is never what you accomplished, but why you set out in the first place.
The profound final realization that gathers all the geographies and all the journeys together is this. The road belongs not to the feet. Direction belongs to the heart's intention. Even someone who never physically leaves their small room has already arrived if their intention is true.
This book, The Geography of Truth, is a comprehensive meditation. It was written to make that profound, life-altering difference between merely looking and truly seeing, between only going somewhere and actually turning toward a vital direction, echo within the reader long after the final page is turned.
Anka takes us on this sweeping tour of the earth, and in doing so, he allows us to discover ourselves. The map is no longer an external document in your hands. You realize that you are the map itself, etched with the history of human search and spiritual resilience.
This work really encourages slow reading. It's a form of daily meditation or contemplation, maybe one place at a time. Let the geography act as a mirror and just notice how your inner landscape changes with each chapter you explore. The work ends, but the reader's most important questions must begin. The final, conscious turning belongs solely to the reader's intention.
And as you step upon the earth, it is not your feet but your soul that begins to walk. Then it will not be the book that starts to speak, but truth itself.
And remember, you were born to walk.